Sharpen your mind, cut through the lies. Blindfolded faith meets open eyes. No chains of man can make us fall. We stand our proof, we'll heed the call. Tear down the walls of superstition's place. Forge down the path where reason stands still. The war of logic in every lens. Like the X-Men.
Oh. Hi, I'm Anti-Theist Man, and I look at religious stuff. There are many different religions across the world, each with a variety of fascinating myths or beliefs that seem to go back as far as humans have existed. However, do any of them comport with reality, or are they just stories created as explanations for things we couldn't understand? Today I want to look into Noah's flood and the giant ark he built to save the chosen few. So let's dive deep into the science, logistics, and history behind Noah's Ark. First, the basic story. God's being his usual creepy peeper self and sees great evil on the earth. Humanity has grown corrupt, violent, deeply disappointing the Creator, so he lovingly decides he needs to wipe out every human, animal, and plant on the planet. Fucking hell, mate. Calm the fuck down.
Boy, that escalated quickly. I mean, that really got out of hand fast.
It jumped up a notch.
It did, didn't it?
God chooses Noah, a 600-year-old man. He might be old as fuck, but he's also righteous and God-fearing. So God entrusts him with his horrific mission of global genocide.
Stop right there. I'm in.
God gives Noah detailed instructions to build a massive wooden ship. He and his family are told to gather pairs of every living animal. As prophesied, a worldwide flood arrives, rain falls for 40 days and nights, and water covers the earth, destroying all life outside the ark. Noah, his wife, their 3 sons, and his daughter-in-law, along with the pairs of animals, remain safe within the ark. After the rain stops and the water starts to subside, a dove is sent out and eventually returns with an olive leaf, proof that land has reappeared. Once on dry ground, Noah builds an altar and offers thanks. God promises never to destroy all life with a flood and sets a rainbow in the sky as his signature to this new contract. Now that we're all refreshed on the basics, let's get into a few of the numerous problems with this literal interpretation and why this ancient flood myth sinks under scrutiny. According to Genesis, the ark was 300 cubits long. That's about 450 feet, roughly the length of 1.5 football fields. This would be difficult, if not impossible, to build. But even if they did manage it, the thing wouldn't be seaworthy, as even today's wooden ships rarely exceed 350 feet, because wood bends, twists, and breaks under stress. Even modern engineers say a wooden ship that size would leak or collapse without steel reinforcement. In fact, in 1993, a Korean creationist group built a full-scale model, and it had to be reinforced with steel to stay intact. So unless Noah had access to modern materials and shipbuilding know-how, it's physically implausible. The boat not being seaworthy isn't the only issue regarding the size, as how did Noah and his family build the thing to begin with? God had a 600-year-old man with zero shipbuilding experience construct the most advanced wooden vessel of the ancient world, without a shipyard, cranes, or construction equipment, or even a work crew to assist him, just one family and a fuckload of wood. The funny part is, despite it being an impressively big boat 4,000 years ago, and being too big to survive an apocalyptic ocean, the biblical authors couldn't begin to comprehend the amount of animals on the planet, so it's still too small.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
In fact, smaller than a modern Carnival cruise ship, and not remotely big enough to house 2 of every animal on Earth. This brings us to the second problem of the story. This ship holding polar bears, penguins, giraffes, termites, lions, elephants, and the 47,000 species of beetles. And they wouldn't be allowed to eat each other, so the fuckload of species-specific food required to feed them all for a year. Where did they grow the eucalyptus for the koalas, or keep the year's worth of zebras to feed the lions? There are millions of species on Earth. Even if we narrow that down to land-dwelling non-marine life, we're talking about thousands of species. 2 of each. That's tens of thousands of animals. And once we account for the food and fresh water you need to store somewhere on board, your big ship starts to shrink dramatically. And I don't want to think about the round-the-clock constant waste removal needed to keep this zoo functioning.
That is one big pile of shit.
The entire Noah family would be up to their neck in animal shit. The miracle would be if anything got off that boat without major infections and diseases. Not to mention, where did Noah collect the penguins, kangaroos, sloths, pandas, and polar bears? From every continent? Did he return them afterward? Did the kangaroos just hop from Australia? Did penguins waddle across Africa? Did the sloths even make it in time? Also, once all these animals get off the boat and go home, what can they do? The last 2 lions would eat the last 2 zebras and then starve to death. The gorillas would go home to a dead jungle and have no plants to eat. 2 of each species isn't even enough to keep the Earth's ecosystem functioning. Nor is it enough to repopulate species even if they could survive without food, because apparently the omnipotent creator of the universe wasn't aware of the need of genetic diversity. In fact, if we think about it, how he started it all with just 2 humans in Adam and Eve, I think this God is revealing a very niche kink. If it is just 2 of each kind, only 2, then from that point on, every single animal species repopulated the planet with just 1 pet. Which means, according to this story, the entire animal kingdom is built on one giant incest fuckfest. And not just the animals, but the human race too. As it was built from just one family where fathers fuck daughters, mothers fuck sons, and sisters fuck brothers.
Dad says he's got a child's mind.
Okay.
Lives up Summer Street with his mum and his sister.
And are they as big as his?
Who?
The mum and the sister.
Same person.
Which, if true, would result in an inheritance of harmful recessive genes, giving future generations developmental delays, physical anomalies, intellectual disabilities, and a higher mortality rate.
Avert your eyes from her great beauty.
This kind of inbreeding has been used in animal breeding to try and strengthen desired characteristics, but its negatives often outweigh the benefits. An example would be the artificial selection used to give us the pug dog, which suffers from a variety of health issues, including needing eye drops because it can't blink, or snorting and snoring due to its inability to breathe correctly.
You've sinned against nature.
Please kill me.
Maybe the evil of the world was just an excuse for him to wank in the sky as he peeps on his live incest porn. Maybe God is just a dirty boy, a filthy voyeur, a pervert who gets off watching family members getting down. Not just humans, but the animals as well. Even the extinct ones, bringing us to our new and hilarious problem for Noah's Ark. Dinosaurs are not mentioned in the Bible. But as we have discovered thousands of dinosaur bones all over the globe, they had to account for them somehow. So they did some twisting and squeezing with words like behemoth and leviathan to represent dinosaurs, and managed to sneak them on board the ark, hoping we wouldn't question it. Now, the Noah story is typically read as a literal historic event by young Earth creationists, who believe the Earth is only around 6,000 to 10,000 years old.
What, are you retarded?
With God creating all the land animals on the 6th day of creation. They used to say dinosaur bones were placed by God as a test of faith, but I guess they realized how shit that argument was. So now they have come to the conclusion that dinosaurs are land animals. Then God created them on the 6th day with all the others, and so they also had a place on the ark with the other animals. One issue with this is they're big bastards, So now you have to squeeze a lot more onto this already full boat. However, they tried to counter this by saying they took only the babies to save space. Okay. Also, the bones we find don't fit with a 4,000-year timeline, as they range from 250 to 60 million years ago, which fucks with the story a bit. Also, God made Noah build all these areas on the boat, and then feed them for a year, and save them from the global apocalypse, for them all to step off the boat and immediately die, because they're all dead. So what a waste of everybody's time. If God knew they were all going to die, why put them on the boat to begin with? This is clearly a desperate attempt to patch up their broken worldview, as they bend over backwards to try and make contradicting evidence fit with the Bible. They even had the balls to build a giant life-size ark in Kentucky. As a museum, you can pay and go and see how realistic the story is, and they include dinosaurs as part of the exhibition. I guess if you're making the money where you're able to waste millions on a big fake boat, you'll do anything to keep the grift going. But however hard they try, they cannot silence the past. Maybe the most inconvenient problem is its timing in human history. The Bible's timeline suggests the flood happened around 2300 BCE. But by then, the Egyptians had already built pyramids. The Sumerians had written records. The Chinese had a developing civilization.
Hey, fuck you, Mongolian! Don't you break down my wall! Get out of here, fucking Mongolian!
And not one of these cultures seemed to notice that they all died in a global flood. A flood that wiped out every person on Earth except one family. That would have left some archaeological trace, but there's none. Zero evidence of a global bottleneck in human genetics, or a sudden mass extinction of civilizations around that time. In fact, we have so much information on earlier cultures. We even know that earlier versions of the story the Bible stole from. Just a few examples are the Eridu Genesis, which features a king priest warned by the god Enki to build a boat and save lives before an all-encompassing flood. Or the Atrahasis, I think, which tells of a man instructed to build an ark to survive divine judgment, sent due to human noise and overpopulation. He preserves his family and animals from a 7-day flood, and it ends with the gods putting limits on childbirth and the human lifespan. This story also inspired another pre-Noah story called the Epic of Gilgamesh, where a man is let in on the gods' plans to flood the world for 6 days and nights due to overpopulation. And he builds a ship, sending out birds to test for land, and is ultimately granted immortality. Now we can clearly see the parallels between these stories. I would call this stealing from previous religions, using the older stories people are familiar with to help them relate to your new mysterious religion. But biblical scholars view this as cultural borrowing, adaptation, and theological reinterpretation, infusing earlier stories with their unique moral focus, for example, adding the emphasis on human sin. It's just unfortunate for the modern theologians that we found the originals they copied from. It's also unfortunate we learned how to read the very planet we live on and its past, resulting in to flood the entire Earth above the highest mountain, let's say Everest, you'd need over 3 times the amount of water currently on Earth. Where would it all come from? And where did it all go? And please don't be a twat and say God did it. All conversation is dead when we start with God did it, God did it, God did it.
Oh, magic.
Also, Earth covers things slowly over time. This causes layers of fossils in the Earth that we can date. Once we've found enough, we can start making predictions about what we should find in what layer, giving us the phylogenetic tree we have. If the flood had happened, this wouldn't be the case. We would see everything dead all at the same point. One giant graveyard of every animal as they all died at once. We have never found a T-Rex fossil next to a kangaroo fossil. The T-Rex will always be far deeper in the ground, buried with millions of years of Earth. There is no geological evidence of a global flood. We do see evidence of local floods, like the Mesopotamian flood around 2900 BCE, and many cultures have flood myths, probably inspired by those local disasters. But a global flood, the rocks don't lie, and they say no. Of course, all the science is inconsequential compared with the supposed lesson of this story, bringing us right along to natural disasters like tsunamis and earthquakes are tragic events we sometimes need to overcome. But the idea of a purposeful global annihilation from the very being that created us is far more horrific. I would struggle to worship a being who could wipe out everything he created with no hesitation or regret. It is said the God of the Bible can't feel regret, as he already knows everything that has or ever will happen. Meaning he knew the outcome of this story and made the decisions that resulted in it anyway. How can you believe in a loving God worthy of worship when it could horrifically kill you on a whim, like a child killing ants with a kettle full of water?
Let's go home and play.
Maybe the years of isolation in the black void of space created an insane dictator.
I'm Rounry. A little Rounry. Pour it on me.
Prone to bouts of impulsive, violent behavior. A narcissist with an inflated sense of self-importance and a deep need for excessive attention and admiration, with zero empathy for others. Acting out with psychotic rage, as this flood clearly shows no regard for the lives of living things. Or maybe he's just a cunt. This flood is definitely cunt behavior, from the universe's biggest cunt. The cunt. At minimum, this event has to make you question the moral fabric within the Bible and its God. Thanos was the biggest Marvel villain, and he only snapped out half of life. At least it was quick and painless. He didn't make everyone slowly drown. Of course, we know the real reason for this contradicting character. A hero or villain can only be as intelligent or moral as the people writing them. And 2,000 years ago, they had a very different opinion on right and wrong. They had to fear this God's power and do everything he said. So stories like this were made as a warning to obey and give us your money. 2,000 years later, not much has changed. But that is the theologians' Achilles' heel, as they are stuck with an unchangeable book that has lost all credibility, as we discovered more and more of their answers were wrong. You can only twist the words so far, and now they are left clinging on to anyone who will listen and blindly follow without thought. But with all our new technology and access to information, the voice of reason is getting ever louder to combat these horrific books. I can appreciate if you believe the Bible is literally the Word of God and the supreme book to live your life by. Then you need to make this and every story a reality. But unfortunately, the science doesn't support it. The logistics fall apart, and the historical and geological records don't match. Now, that doesn't mean it's completely meaningless. Myths often carry deep cultural and symbolic value for some people. But if you're asking whether it literally happened, the answer is a clear no. Personally, I'm relieved this story and the characters in the Bible are works of fiction, because this story shows a horrific abuse of power from an all-powerful dictator. And if this God did exist in our reality, it would be a truly terrifying thought to have this invisible man with the temperament to wipe us all out on a whim and send us to hell to be tortured for eternity.
Damn it!
Despite this God's power, he wouldn't get my respect, nor any worship. In fact, I'd rather get on my knees to suck a big dick before honoring the biblical God.
Find a happy place! Find a happy place!
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this breakdown, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments your favorite problem with the Noah story. Until next time, follow the evidence and keep thinking critically. Wait. What kind of vehicle is God? An ice cream van. Why? Because those that follow him closely are usually pedophiles.